Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this planning meeting of the Melton Borough Council. I am Councillor Alan Thwaites, Chair of Planning. Just some housekeeping before we move on. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist anyone who needs any assistance. Please put your phone to silent during this meeting. We will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members speaking, please raise your hand if you wish to speak and speak directly into the microphone in front of you. Remember to turn it off once you have finished. Members voting will be by raised hands. I'd like to introduce those present this evening. The members this evening are, to my right, Councillor Pip Olnott, Councillor Alison Freer, who is substituting for Councillor Ian Atherton, Councillor Ronan Brown and Councillor Marilyn Gordon. To my left of Councillor James Mason, Councillor Margaret Glancy, Councillor Pat Cumbers, Councillor Lee Higgins and Councillor Don Pritchett. We have a team of officers present who are, to my left, Senior Solicitor Tom Pickwell, to my right, Director for Planning Sarah Legg, Senior Planning Officer Andrew Cunningham, Senior Planning Officer Richard Redford, the Planning Officer Amy Smith. We also have a Democratic Services team present, assisting with the technology and taking the minutes. That's Adam Green and Helen Ainge. Just before we actually move on to the agenda tonight, I just want to make one quick statement. I would like to reflect upon some of the comments on social media around the solar farm application considered by Planning Committee last week. As those of us that were present will know, we spent a long time debating what was a complex and challenging application, and it is quite natural the outcome has generated public discussion and debate, all of which is fine and healthy. As with the majority of planning decisions, some will agree, some people won't. What is disappointing is a number of comments made against individuals serving this committee, many of whom do not have the right to reply. And while I have no interest in giving these comments any airtime at all, I wish to show my complete support for all of the officers and all of the members against any such accusations. Officers did their job. They have a legal duty to provide their best professional advice and to give the meeting to ensure any decision we reach is robust. The Planning Committee also did its job, considering the advice and reaching a proper decision, weighing the complex issues carefully. Officers and members are a team who strive to work well together. There will, of course, be times when we disagree, and I would be worried if that was not the case. What is not okay is to then question the integrity of a person, whether it's an officer or whether it's a member, for sharing their opinion and for doing their job. Are we perfect? No. Are we all committed to continually improving? Yes, we are. We deserve the opportunity, supported by constructive feedback, to develop. I would hope all here and those watching would join me in condemning unsubstantiated allegations now and in the future, and supporting officers and members of the planning team to continue their work in providing the best possible services to the communities we all serve. I hope all members would agree with this, particularly as we unanimously resolved to support the debate, not hate campaign in our last council meeting. Thank you very much for your time. I'd like to now move on to the agenda for this evening. Apologies for absence from Ian Atherton and Siggy Atherton, and as we said, Alison Freer is substituting for Ian Atherton. I'd then like to now move on to the minutes for the meeting held on the 17th of August 2023. Do we have any comments about those minutes, or do I have a proposer? Sorry, Marilyn.
I just want to see about this sentence that I've sort of found today. It's on page 4 on your minutes that's been given out, and it's the first paragraph, and it says in the middle, the harm caused by the loss of best and most versatile land does not outweigh the climate change benefits of the proposal.
Sorry, Marilyn, that's the next set of minutes.
Oh, is it?
Yes,
Oh, I'll wait.
yeah.
I'll wait. Okay.
So this is one for the 17th of August, the ordinary meeting before the
Oh,
solar farm
God,
one.
yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Would anybody like to make a comment or propose? Yeah. Councillor Mason, I remember the name. Councillor Mason and Councillor Gantley, seconds. Can we all vote in favour of the minutes? Six. Any against? Any abstains? Okay. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So those minutes passed. So moving on to the minutes of the meeting for the 31st and the reconvened 5th of September meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor Gordon, please carry on.
Thanks, love. Yeah, it's just a sentence on page 4, and it's in the middle of the where the reasons are, and it's in the middle of that paragraph. It says the harm caused by the loss of best and most versatile land does not outweigh the climate change benefits of the proposal. Should it read the harm caused by the loss and best and most versatile land does outweigh the climate change benefits of the proposal?
Thank you very much.
you.
Amendment.
Thanks.
Yeah, added to that. Any other comments? I would also then like to propose the amendments which you have in front of you, which I and the Vice Chair have actually added to the minutes. Would anybody like to make any comments around those added amendments? Councillor Allnut.
I have complete faith in the Chair and Vice Chair.
So could I have a proposer for the minutes with the amendments? Councillor Gantley proposed, Councillor Mason to second, and to vote for those minutes for those that were present. Seven. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's carried. So going on to declarations of interest. Members to declare any interest as appropriate in respect of items to be considered at this meeting. Would anybody like to declare any interest? Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And upon advice from the Solicitor of the Council, I'm not declaring an interest, which is quite bizarre in one way. But, however, due to historical reasons why I've not taken part in the debate on land of Burdick Close, Great Dolby, I think, and while the solicitor said that I'm perfectly entitled to carry on and listen to the debate and vote, I think for all sides, it's just appropriate that I carry that on for personal reasons. So I'm going to just withdraw, and the solicitors. So I've asked the solicitor for advice of how to withdraw, and Mr. Bigwell said I can just sit in the public gallery as long as I don't wave. I think he said.
Yeah, I'm very happy to send you to the back of the room. Thank you very much. No other declarations of interest. In that case, then I'd like to move on to the schedule of applications. First application this evening is application 21/00825/VAC, the land off Burdick Close, Great Dolby. And I understand that is going to be Richard speaking this evening. So Richard, please go forward.
Thank you, Chair. Could we get the first slide put up, please, on the presentation? So just by way of context, for those unfamiliar with the site, the area within that red edge boundary is the application site. You will see a road running from the top right into the site. That is Burdick Close. This application seeks two elements only. Firstly, to vary conditions 5, 8 and 23 of the outline approval. And secondly, to discharge 10 pre-commencement conditions attached to the same outline approval. The application is recommended for approval. The alterations to the 3 conditions relate to the roads within the site and seek to ensure that the roads meet current standards as those in use at the time of the outline approval having been issued have been superseded by new, more up-to-date standards. With regards to the pre-commencement conditions, the discharges sought would enable implementation following the determination of the reserved matters submission that, as per your agenda, is currently also being considered. I would draw your attention to the committee report, the agenda report, which highlights that this application was previously presented to the Planning Committee on the 29th of September last year, where it was deferred. The site access is off Burdick Close, with the site currently comprising a field crossed by a number of public rights-of-way, with ground levels falling on the site towards both Burdick Close and the settlement itself. If we could move to the second slide, please. So this drawing shows the amended layout proposed to take account of the changes to the roadway. The grey areas, as you will see on that plan, dictate the roads to be adopted. The brown stretches are those roads that are to remain private and unadopted. The outline application approved under reference 180071 OUT granted outline permission for the construction of up to 35 dwellings and included both access and layout as part of that approval. Access to and from the site was and continues to be via Burdick Close as approved, with the changes being to the internal roads as already indicated. The three conditions in question are all conditions that that specify plans on which the roads need to be updated to meet current standards. The reserve matters application I've made reference to is, whilst in hand by the council and under consideration, does not form part of the consideration of this application. The consultee and third-party responses are generally as per the main agenda report. One additional representation has been received from the parish council. This was sent to officers as well as all members of the planning committee on Sunday the 10th of September and raised concerns regarding public health and water quality concerns. As these were sent direct to members, I will not go over the summary, as you will have all seen those and be fully aware of the content of that correspondence. Moving on to the consideration of the application, in terms of the principle of development, the outline planning permission was granted in July 2019 and the reserved matters submission was submitted within the 3-year timeframe required to be submitted. As such, the principle for the residential development of the site remains existing, and it has got a live approval for residential development. The principle therefore continues to be acceptable. Turning to highway matters, some members will be aware from the previous committee that this was one of the reasons for the deferral. In order to address the questions that, in terms of the deferral relating to the widths of the roads, I can confirm that the existing road, when measured off the topographical survey, is 5.51 meters wide. So that's Burdick Close, where it meets the site. The main road, the roads within the site, as proposed here, are also 5.51 meters. So that grey road from where it connects to Burdick Close will be the same width as the roadway of Burdick Close. The private roads will be, as per the agenda report, 4.8 meters wide. So not as wide as the main roads, but still of a size to allow 2 vehicles to pass. We'll draw your attention to the main agenda, which sets out that the current adopted standards for roadways, as per the Leicestershire County Highway Design Guide, set out that for dwellings numbering up to 50, the width of roads is required to be 4.8 meters wide, whilst anything between 50 and 400 dwellings requires a roadway of 5.5 meters wide. The number of dwellings hasn't changed, but the roadway are of a standard that meets the higher requirement of the design guide. In addition to this, there is a footpath on the side of the main roads as well, the roads to be adopted. Highway Authority, as per the agenda, have no objections to the scheme. Officers are of the opinion that it complies with not only the design guide, but also the provisions of local plan policy IN2 and is therefore acceptable. Moving on to the second reason for deferral in respect of water safety concerns and the response from Severn Trent Water. Following the deferral, officers engaged in further dialogue with Severn Trent to address these. Now, Severn Trent confirmed that the rising main from the pumping station is 180 millimeters, which is, from their perspective, is acceptable. They have also confirmed that the foul flows being introduced into the existing system are minimal, so would not make a noticeable difference to the existing situation. Now, following the deferral last September, additional information was received. I can't remember whether it's from a local resident or whether it's from the parish council with regards to an overflow of a foul drain. This information was passed direct to Severn Trent Water to investigate. Their investigation has shown that there was a blockage further down this stretch of pipework that was as a result of a blockage of oils, fats and greases that had entered the system via means unknown. They have confirmed that this blockage has been unblocked, and they have also confirmed that there is a plan in place to ensure that moving forward, the foul drains are maintained and cleaned on a more regular basis. On this basis, Severn Trent Water are satisfied that there will be no unacceptable impacts on the foul drainage network or the network generally. Officers in receipt of this technical advice are of the same opinion, and as such, the matters in this respect are acceptable. If we could move to the next slide, please. Now, turning to the discharge of conditions, the discharge of conditions are, in most instances, relatively technical items. And I just wanted to bring up what I could show you with relative ease. Now, this slide relates to landscaping and shows a selection of the different types of landscaping proposed on the development through the landscaping scheme. The areas highlighted in red, if like me, you're unable to read Latin, the bits in red actually let you know what the relevant planting is in English. So we can see from there, you've got like hornbeam, hawthorn, hazel, elder, rowans and the like. So a fair few native species in there as well. If we can move to the next slide, please. Now this slide shows the actual layout in terms of the overarching context of the landscaping scheme. So we can see areas of planting, retained trees. The areas in white are the garden areas for the dwellings, which will be grassed up. You've got amenity grass. You've got areas of wildflower and meadow grass distributed in there as well. If we move to the next slide, please. Now, conditions 11 and 12 relate to rights of way crossing the site. This plan serves to provide a bit of details on the existing paths to be diverted, alternative footpaths and unaffected footpaths through the scheme. It also confirms the surface materials of the roads to be adopted and unadopted, as well as the footpaths thereto. The agenda report sets out that the technical responses on these pre-commencement conditions have come back and said that in some instances following amendment, the submitted details are acceptable and therefore capable of being discharged in a satisfactory manner, subject to compliance with those provisions. So on the basis of the report, officers are satisfied that the conditions can be discharged. Moving on to the next slide, by way of providing a bit of a focused summary, just draw your attention to these points. The Highway Authority are satisfied that the changes to the 3 conditions are acceptable, meet current standards, and they have no objections. With regards to Severn Trent Water, they have investigated the existing infrastructure in the area, cleared an existing blockage, planned maintenance going forward, and have no objections to the proposal. Technical consultees on the other matters and discharge conditions have no objections. And as such, the variation of conditions is considered to be acceptable, recommended for refusal, while the pre-commencement conditions are recommended for discharge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. Do any of the members have any questions for further clarification from the presentation? Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your report. What confused me a little bit about this one, that there's no documents on the portal since the September 2022 meeting. So evidence of meetings and letters on headed note paper. And also I was expecting, if we didn't understand the document that was already on, like the landscape, I'm a bit confused as whether there's a new landscape document, an existing one. So, I mean, it's left me a bit confused.
If I can, Chair. There is only one new additional item on the council's website in respect of this, and that is an email chain with Severn Trent Water that sets out Severn Trent Water's position in terms of the blockage found, the clearance forward plan to maintain it. That is there. I know it is because I've checked it a number of times to make sure I'm not misplacing it. So in terms of that was the only bit. The dimensions with regards to roads, I printed the scale out, I printed the plans out scaled and checked those via phone call with the agent to make sure that those road dimensions are correct as well. Hope that clarifies.
Thanks, Richard. Any other? Councillor Allnut.
Chair, yeah, it's partly linked with what Don was asking about. My concern is the flooding and effluent issue with this. What I want to be clear on, perhaps the law officer can advise me on this. Do the emails that we've received constitute a firm statement from Severn Trent that each of those items that we saw listed and have been reported have been put in stone, as it were? And if in the future we find that they haven't been done, does the existence of those emails enable us to do something about a failure to fulfill a condition? Because this is the big issue, isn't it, really, that the effluent that could come out. So I just want some reassurance about where we stand if we find that in reality these reassurances are not correct.
Thank you. Tom, are you happy to answer?
Thank you, Chair. My understanding is that Severn Trent have confirmed that there is no issue outstanding since the blockage has been cleared, and that there is capacity. But it's probably best for the planners to answer that specifically. Coming back to what you said about sort of what happens if there is an issue, they are regulated by people like Ofwat's, and there are regimes there as well that can go through. So if there's a breach of condition, the planning authority could look into it. However, there are other obligations upon the water companies through things like Ofwat and their legislation that they have to comply with as well.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions for Councillor Brown?
Can we just get clarity? My understanding is that unless there's a policy reason, we can't just be refusing it on water or discharge, etc. I just want to be clear before we start going into questioning and debates, because I don't want to have another red herring running around, which will not necessarily help us.
Thank you. Apologies. Sorry, can you just repeat the question? It was that, can we go against,
No,
based
no,
on
what I'm just saying is that my understanding of this from the previous meeting even, and from other planning meetings is, there's no policy reason once Severn Trent have said they're satisfied for us to refuse. I'm just thinking, I just want to be helpful for the meeting, that we don't start going down rabbit holes that we don't need to, and we stick to the questions that we want to on this. I just want to be just clear that's where we're going, where we can and cannot go with this.
yes, I would agree. So the technical experts have come back with their response and said that there's not an issue. So for you to be able to challenge that, you would need another expert opinion. So in the absence of that, you would need to take that with good weight.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions? Councillor Clancy.
Just a comment, really. I do think that members are fully aware of the situation, but thank you for your advice.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? In that case, I'd like to move on to the first of the speakers for this, which is Beth Johnson, representing the Parish Council. Is Beth, if you'd like to come forward to the table, please. You'll find on the microphone there's a face in the middle. If you press the button, your microphone will come on and you'll be on camera. And you have 3 minutes. Tom will actually give you a warning at 30 seconds from the end of that 3 minutes. So for that point, if you could start bringing it towards a close. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming this evening.
Good evening, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. Earlier this week, I sent out photographs of sewage running from a private garden and down the street in Great Dolby. This is the 3rd time this has happened in that garden, and the proposed development is to be served by that sewer. The officer's report reassures the committee that remedial work has been done and that the sewer can now carry around double the quantity of sewage that it carries at present, which is not quite the minimal additional flow referred to in the report. It's the water company's legal duty to provide a sewer to new development, and if in their judgment a new sewer is not required, there are no powers to insist on an upgrade. I live right beside the route of the sewer and the brook and the pumping stations nearby, and when Severn Trent engineers are around in the village, I like to talk to them. They're the professionals. They know about the best practice in the industry. They say that the pumping station at Great Dolby cannot cope. Now, under present circumstances, several pumps have burnt out recently. Tankers with pumps frequently intercept and carry away the contents of the sewer before it reaches the pumping station. The solution to put in a larger pump would not work because the rising main to Kirby Bellows could not take a greater volume of material. They also tell us that all the sewers in Great Dolby are too small. I've observed at the pumping station and not connected with heavy rainfall, untreated effluent being discharged directly into Great Dolby Brook. And don't think charming babbling brook. There's hardly any fall as the brook goes through the village, and most of the time around 3 centimetres of water sit there hardly moving, which means that any accidental or intentional discharge of sewage can sit unmoving for quite a long time. The brook can fill quickly when there's a lot of heavy rain, washing away the contamination, which will then make its way to the River Reek, a B-quality river that is rare in the Midlands. Beside the Reek is the Priory Water Nature Reserve, great for birds and insects, Frisbee Lake's luxury lodge park, paddle sports and fishery, and otters on its quieter stretches, which will all suffer from declining river
30
quality.
seconds.
As we see almost daily in the news, there's a national crisis for poor sewage management and reluctance to invest. And we're really worried locally on public health and environmental grounds. And we seek assurance that measures are in place to protect village residents and the wider environment from the negative impacts of effluent pollution.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to stay seated and turn the microphone off, so yeah, thank you. Do any of the members have any questions? Councillor Olnett.
Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask a couple of blunt questions, accepting what you've said in good faith. It's sort of believable. Has the parish council considered paying for an independent technical assessment so that it could be used to as evidence the other way? And if not, would you do so now? If we were to say defer the item.
You turned me on. I think we would certainly consider it very seriously, yes. Given the national situation with sewage, you know, I think we've got to do the best we can to protect our residents. Can I just add something about the regular planned cleansing that Severn Trent referred to?
We'll see if any of the members would like to ask that question.
Could you tell me about the regular planned cleansing?
I mentioned that I had noticed a discharge of effluent into the brook. Was nothing to do with heavy rain, which of course is illegal. But I thought about it a little while, and how one of the ways that engineers cleared the blockage in the sewer was to connect themselves to the mains water and basically power wash the sewer out with mains pressure clean water. And I suspect that that might have been what has overwhelmed the system at the pumping station end, and that's why effluent ended up in the brook. And of course, if they're talking about a regular planned cleansing programme, then that's regularly going to be discharged straight into Dolby Brook.
Thank you. Any Councillor Pritchett?
Are you in your communications directly with Severn Trent? Are you on the list for a capital enhancement in the area sometime in the future?
Not as far as we didn't have a response to that letter that we sent that you were copied into.
Any other questions for the speaker? No? In that case, thank you very much for your time and thank you for coming this evening. I'd like to now call forward Caroline Chave, who's the agent speaking for the application. Thank you very much, Caroline. Same instructions you'll find. Thank you for coming this evening. You'll find the microphone with the face. And you know, again, have 3 minutes. Tom will give you a warning at 30 seconds. And if you could start closing your presentation at that point, that would be very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. It's a year since this application was deferred from Planning Committee, and we've been working hard with officers to address the issues raised, principally in relation to sewage, but also the query in relation to access. Although the access to the site was already subject to full approval and no changes to it were proposed, we've responded to the reason for deferral by using our topographical survey to establish the access road leading into the site is 5.51 metres wide, only needs to be 4.8 metres wide to meet highway standards for this size of development, so hopefully this query is now addressed. The year's delay has mainly been due to extensive liaison with Severn Trent Water following concerns raised by the parish council and ward member in relation to sewage capacity. We don't dispute that there have been flooding events in the village, and these concerns being raised through the application have served to highlight the issues to Severn Trent Water and prompt investigation and assessment over the last year. The previous flooding has been identified to have been caused by a blockage, which has now been resolved, and a programme of maintenance put in place to prevent further blockage. So the issue being raised, plus the focus placed on it by our application, has thankfully prompted action from Severn Trent to resolve the issue. Severn Trent have assessed the impact of our development on the system, determining that the flows being introduced would be minimal and would not have made a noticeable difference to the issues in any case. Over the course of the last year, we have also applied for and obtained full technical approval from Severn Trent Water to connect to the foul and surface water sewerage systems. Therefore, there can be no objection to this already approved development taking place on this allocated site on sewerage grounds. The application before you was originally made to make some changes to the internal highway layout and bring it to adoptable standards. It was not a forum for revisiting the principles of the development. Nevertheless, we've worked hard to address any queries and provide reassurance over technical matters. And we would now respectfully request that this site is not held back any longer from bringing forward homes to fulfil the local plan allocation. And I would ask that members focus on the official communications from Severn Trent Water that have been a result of a year's worth of negotiation. And with the greatest respect to the submissions made by the previous speaker, conversations with site operatives on site
30 seconds.
should not carry weight in this committee meeting. As a sort of second-hand, third-hand information, and if ask any workman about a problem, you'll get a different version of it and solution to it depending on their position in the hierarchy and what their opinion is. So please, I'd ask you to focus on the information before you your officers are presented in their report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And stay there for a moment and see if any members have any questions for clarification. No questions? Thank you very much for your time. In that case, then, I'd like to open the application for debate. Would anybody like to open the debate? Councillor Holnett, thank you.
Since nobody else wishes to, I think we should debate it. I want to thank the officers for the report, and I acknowledge. I do beg your pardon. I do. Can you hear me now? Right. Okay. Thank you. Yep. I'd like to thank the officers for the report, and I acknowledge Councillor Brown's comment about we've got to stick to the letter, as it were. I also acknowledge that the applicant has been acting in good faith and trying to deal with real issues, but on a practical basis. Generally speaking, I find the application satisfactory. My big concern, as I've suggested, is this question of flooding and effluent. And trusting in the water company is not something that, I feel springs to mind, bearing in mind the national picture with that particular organisation. I am concerned that perhaps the parish could have used the intervening months to commission their own alternative professional study on it. And that is a great difficulty, really, because here we are a long way down the piece and we are dependent upon, if I may say so, a second-hand opinion about what might happen or might not happen if the minimal flow becomes a bit bigger. And that's why I hinted at a deferral, although it's not ideal, so that could be tested further. I accept what the applicant said in many respects. We can't take an individual's view on it, however well-meaning they are. And that's why actually getting a proper review of it, I don't think would be out of place. That's my feeling at the moment, unless the officers tell me we'd be doing something desperately illegal. But I think a deferral to get more technical advice on this one topic would be helpful.
Sarah, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, the agent did state that they do already have their licence from Severn Trent to be able to connect to the network.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah. I completely sympathise with the view of the residents and the parish council. And if you have overflowing sewage, it's going to not only affect their ward, but my ward probably, as the chair of the parish council said. However, if we want to defer, we need a reason to defer. There's been 12 months, and well, not 12 months, but about 9 months to get here. Unless somebody else can come up with it, I can't see that reason. The other reason I can't see is a reason to refuse it. So I've been through all of the policies and the NPPF, etc. And I just can't see anything. It's not out of want to trying. And you'd have seen that from this committee so far. So my contribution is that, they've met the requirements. We have this issue of the license with Severn Trent. I've got the same issue in my parish. I'm sure everybody else has got the same in their wards, where you're connecting to, and wants to have that license, that's it. And we have tankers down in Frisbee for the last 2 weeks because it can't take the capacity, but we can't do a lot about it because those licenses were granted. So unless somebody can come up with a reason to defer or a really good reason to refuse, but I think defer is more likely, I can't see how I can do anything other but than support the application. And I'm just speaking openly in my view. I know people would disagree with me, but that's my view looking at the evidence put on the ground. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Would anybody else like to add to the debate? Therefore, would anybody like to actually recommend the proposal for acceptance or for anything? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I know not everybody's liking, but I will propose the application.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Glancy will second. In that case, then we have a proposer and a seconder, and I'll call for a vote by hands to accept the proposal and accept the application. Could you vote for, please, the proposal? 5. Yeah. And against? 2. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Therefore, the proposal is carried. Yeah, Councillor Gordon, has that recorded? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the second application this evening, which is 22-01217 FUL 1A Bradgate Lane, Ashfordby, and Amy will be making the presentation this evening. Amy, please carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. The application before you relates to premises at Unit 1A Bradgate Lane and 128 Main Street in the settlement of Ashfordby. Next slide, please. The proposed development comprises the part demolition, extension and change of use to 128 Main Street from a sui generis public house to Class E retail store. The description of development also refers to the change of use from retail to cafe of Unit 1A Bradgate Lane, although as detailed in the officer's report, this element of the proposal does not require planning permission. The application has received written objections from 13 households and a petition of 148 signatures. The application is presented to you today with a recommendation to approve for reasons set out in the report. Next slide, please. The proposed ground floor plan of 128 Main Street is now on screen, looking from above with Main Street to the left. The existing built form to be demolished is outlined within the red dashed line and does not include the original facade of the building fronting Main Street, which is to be retained. The green and purple areas show the proposed single-storey extension to the rear of the existing facade. It is considered that the proposed extension would have no undue impact upon neighbouring amenity. The development would provide 260 square metres of net sales area, and the submitted retail impact assessment concludes that the proposal would not undermine the viability or vitality of Melton Mowbray Town Centre. Next slide, please. The proposed development's appearance on the street scene from Main Street is now shown on screen. The Conservation Officer has raised no objection to the development, which retains the facade of the public house, and the proposal is considered to comply with heritage and design policies of the local plan. 128 Main Street was listed as an asset of community value in June 2022. Whilst the ACV listing demonstrates a community use and its listing is afforded moderate weight, the ACV process of giving an option to buy the asset is not relevant in the planning process. It is acknowledged that the proposed development results in the loss of a public house. However, its reuse as another named community facility under policy C7 and the alternative provision of another public house to serve the social interests and well-being of the local community within the same settlement have led me to consider that the proposed development is in accordance with policy C7. We are aware of the exchange of contracts to purchase the property between the owner and the applicant dated prior to the ACV listing, and therefore, under the terms of the legislation, it is not relevant to the disposal of the property. Next slide, please. To conclude, officers consider the proposed development is considered to be compliant with the policies of the Melton Local Plan, as noted in the conclusion of the officer's report. No objections are received from the Conservation Officer, the Highways Authority, or the County Ecologist, subject to conditions, and the proposed development complies with standing advice of the lead local flood authority. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Amy. Would any members have any questions for clarification from Amy? Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you. Just within the report structure, the first of all, the conditions are not laid out in full that I can't check them. The second point, I've got a question on page 11. At the top of page 11, it said it would not undermine the vitality and viability of Melton Mowbray Town Centre. Can you explain the relevance of that, please?
Under policy EC7, it impacts the impact of a new retail unit on the main town centre in the borough of Melton Mowbray. Under that policy, it hits the threshold for a retail impact assessment to be submitted for consideration. And that's what has been proven by the applicant under the retail impact assessment.
Does that policy state a certain distance from Melton Town Centre then?
Don't believe it does. I think it's service centres it refers to.
That's interesting. The other question I've got, I'm personally quite happy with the 11 car park spaces, you know, compared to the size of this and the size of the new one in Bodysford. My question is, it's regarding sustainable travel. We consult the highways people, and every time we build houses, they want travel packs and this sort of thing. It seems to me that when we're looking at village centres, we should be looking for sustainable travel. We've got a simple rack for 3 bikes, right? I wanted to, how is that arrived at? And I have checked scanned through the emerging neighbourhood plan, and I couldn't find anything relating to active travel. So in terms of policy, I couldn't find anything really strong, but it seems to me in the future, and we should be encouraging it with electric bikes, more cycle rates. And then I couldn't find anything policy yet. It turns up in a condition of 3, only 3. How did we arrive at that?
So the cycle provision on site is considered by the Highways Authority in their comments. They refer to their own design guide, and they have requested that that condition is attached to the recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah, actually within the highways, I'm afraid. Yeah, but it doesn't. Yeah, it's out of kilter with the way that we're going with sustainable travel. But thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other members have any? Councillor Higgins.
I've got 2 questions, if you may, Chair. I know some of this came from the briefing. We've had some exchanges as well, and so I'd like to thank the officers for clarifying some of the points. But it is in so one of the points that came out this morning that I sent across to all members and the officers was in April 2027 that the minister had changed the legislation. I just wanted to clarify that document that I sent, that the legislation was changed, that permitted development rights were removed for specifically converting pubs into shops. So that was a question for clarification. So that is material. Is that material thing that's what the
Can I
government
ask,
did?
Sarah?
Yes, so that is correct. That was changed. It's not really material to this decision that you're making today, because you've got an application for planning permission in to determine. So we're not considering what is available to be done under permitted development rights. It's a policy to support it.
I don't want to clarify myself again on that, but what I think I've made it clear in the email. To me, it was the thrust of where government parliament was trying to guide. That's why I was saying that. Not whether we're debating permitted development rights, because we're not.
Yeah, that is the thrust of government guidance back in 2017, but the local plan was adopted in 2018. So we need to take into consideration the policies of the local plan, and that's what Amy has set out in her report.
Okay, well, I'll come to that part later in the debate, so that I don't think that's a question I've got. The other question I did have was, and this hadn't really come out in the questions, I think, from the briefing, has a viability study, either from the previous owner or the current owner, come through about, is the pub viable as it is, or has there been support found from the community that of support for the existing use?
Is this a question for
for
the officer or for the
well,
speakers?
Yeah, it is for the officer,
Okay.
because it would have should have come in, I believe. So has there been a viability study come in? And has there been demonstrable assessment for either the support of its existing use or support for this application here, which is, I believe, what C7 is saying?
Sarah?
Thank you very much. I have taken the opportunity just to print out some copies of policy C7, because that has been the debate that we've been having over emails. So I think, Tom, if you can pass them down that side of the room, please. And Amy, I think you've got them on that side of the room. It is literally just a copy and paste out of the local plan, so there's nothing new being introduced there. And I thought it would probably be reasonable to sort of walk you through essentially our interpretation of the policy. That's okay. So no.
Okay, that's fine.
But that is why I need to walk you through the
And that's fine
policy,
as well.
essentially,
Yeah.
because they don't need to, as we read it. So support will be given to proposals. This is policy C7, support. So it's important to note that the policy starts off as a positive wording here. So it's a supportive policy. Support will be given to proposals and activities that protect, retain or enhance existing community services and facilities. And there's an asterisk there. And the community services and facilities are listed below as to what is considered to be a service and facility. So that includes things like community halls and village halls, village shops, post offices, schools, health services, care homes, public houses, playing fields and allotments. So if we move on, it says, or that lead to the provision of additional assets that improve community cohesion and well-being to encourage sustainable development. Proposals for the change of use of community facilities, and again referencing those below, which would result in the loss of the community use, will only be permitted where it's clearly demonstrated that either, one, there are alternative facilities available and active in the same village which would fulfil the role of the existing use or building, or, and the important word there is or, two, the existing use is no longer viable. So this change of use proposal is for an alternative facility of using the pub as a shop. It's proposing a cafe, and there is an existing facility of a pub already in the village. So we are content that one is activated there, and we do not need to move to two in terms of proving that the existing use is no longer viable. Secondly, it's probably not quite necessarily the right terms to use since we're using ones and twos here in the policy, but secondly, the proposal must also demonstrate that consideration has been given to A, the reuse of the premises for an alternative community business or facility, and that effort has been made to try to secure such a reuse. That is exactly what you're dealing with here, members. It is a reuse of the existing building. It's not being converted into residential. It is a reuse for a community purpose, albeit a different community purpose that serves a slightly different function to a pub. but it is still a cafe where people can meet, and it is still a shop, and it's improving the retail offer in Asfordby. So it is not a loss in the context of the policy. And the second consideration there, so part B, the potential impact the closure may have on the village and its community with regard to the public use and support for the existing and proposed use. And that is probably the part that you could debate this evening in terms of that policy. But we bring you back to the fact that there are 2 pubs currently in the village. There would still be 1 public house in the village, and it is community facilities that the village essentially is gaining. So there's no net loss. It's a different use. I hope that's answered the question sufficiently there as to how we interpret the policy.
Chair answered it perfectly, I thought there. So there's been no viability that has been submitted, but equally, if we are to debate this policy, because I know that has featured, that I'm sure this will feature in the debate, it's B, and I will comment later in the debate. Thank you.
Would any Councillor Olnett?
I've got 2 questions. I'd like some guidance, please. When we talk about facilities in the locality, so you've got 1 pub, or so losing 1 isn't so bad. Does anywhere in the policy any reference to choice occur? Because when we're talking about doctor's surgery, we must have choice, but when we're having a pint of beer, apparently we mustn't have a choice. So that's the first question. Is there any element in policy which enables people to have choice? The second question I had, which I did warn the officers about, so I hope it doesn't come as a complete shock. When we read any policy, and I suppose it's any policy really, and this one is C7, there's a preamble, which is within the body of the corpus of the local plan. And my understanding is that even preambles have to be taken cognizance of and read in conjunction with particular policy lines. And you don't ignore them. They have to be taken account of. And the particular one I'm interested in is 5.11.6, where it says, in the case of public houses and shops, it must be demonstrated that all reasonable efforts have been made to sell or let the property as a public house or shop, and that it is not economically viable. So my question really is, if I'm right in thinking that the preamble has to be taken in conjunction with the particular policy item, if that is true, then has it been demonstrated, which picks up on I've forgotten your name, Lee's comment. There's so many Lees in this place. I don't know where I'm coming or going, but do you see what I mean? I just wanted some, so that it can be heard in public,
would you like to say that?
what the actual answer is. I'm not challenging the veracity of officers, of course.
Thank you very much. So in respect to your first question, in terms of choice, then no, that is not part of the policy at all. The preamble, it's not irrelevant, but it sets a context out and tells a story before the policy. But in terms of the policy is what the policy is, essentially. So that's what went through examination of the local plan. If the inspector thought that the wording needed to have represented more clearly the musts and the shoulds and the quite hard words that are used within the preamble, she would have requested that the policy wording would have changed for it. And that I can't comment on whether she was a teetotal or not, but no, we went through main modifications following the examination of the plan, and wording would have been changed if that was the intention.
Any other questions for clarification? Councillor Pritchett.
Significance and a bit any background information on it being registered as an asset of community value. I don't tend to know much about that.
You okay with that?
I might end up passing over to Amy here briefly because she's got the dates a little bit more easily to hand. But essentially, the pub was sold to the applicant. That was done. There's contracts have been exchanged. The asset of community value was registered after that, so there has not been an opportunity for the public or through that community group to buy. The asset of community value essentially gives them an opportunity to bid for the pub and almost puts a moratorium on future sales in that particular period, but the pub is not for sale. The sale has already gone through. I think it's important, and Amy did mention this in her presentation, that the ACV process sits outside of planning. So it isn't actually something that we particularly determine within planning. It does have a small weight of a consideration within the planning realms, but it's a separate piece of legislation outside of there. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that at all, Amy? Okay, thank you.
But although it was in place after the sale, it was in place while the pub was still trading up until 2023.
Tom, can you?
Thank you. Yep. So the ACV regime was brought in by the Localism Act 2011, and what it is it's a right to bid, as Sarah said. It's not a right to buy or to acquire. So what that means is when an asset is listed as an asset of community value, should that asset then be listed for sale, the community groups have an option to request to be treated as a bidder. If they do that, they then have a period of 6 months in which the property cannot be disposed of, so that they can effectively put together a bid to do so. However, it only becomes relevant with the disposal of an asset. So you could have an ACV that's listed and the owner chooses to do nothing with it for the next few years. That doesn't trigger anything, it's only the sale. With this, as Sarah said, the exchange of contracts happened prior to, and that's when the moratoriums are triggered at the legal exchange. So it's not an agreement, it's the legal exchange. So because of that, we don't actually have what we call a relevant disposal in place that would trigger that. When people dispose of an asset of community value, they have to provide evidence to the local authority that they have complied with that. So if this particular sale did fall through for any reason and there was another one, the chances are that will trigger it, provided that it's within the remaining period. But the sale that we're talking about, because it is already legally exchanged, it does not trigger that process, which is why the officer is saying it's not actually relevant to this this pub.
Dr. Higgins.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pritchett, because it just prompted another question I had. Now, if officers don't know this straight away, because you might need to do some research, I did mean to do this a bit earlier and I forgot to do it. Has the community registered an asset of community value for either the co-op or the other convenience store in the village? Because and the reason for the logic of that is I think the debate may come about of what the community values, and so has the community expressed a value to the shops, because they can be assets of community value. Thank you.
Tom will have a look. Is there any other questions? No, in that case, then I'll move on to the next speaker. I'd like to thank the next two speakers who have actually agreed to share their time. So they'll have 1 minute 30 each. But I'd like to call forward Sarah Parker first. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Thanks. I'll let you sit down first. You have 1 minute 30 seconds, and Tom will give you a warning at 15 seconds. So
Okay.
at that time, if you could be very
Quick at wrapping
quick
up.
at bringing.
Won't be
Thank you
long.
very much. I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Sorry, Chair, could I just, sorry, as they're going to exchange, if they're slightly over, would you be able to time, because obviously the other side might need those extra seconds.
That
So-
is why I was asking that
yeah.
the 15 seconds we would
Yeah.
be very
Yeah,
and very tight on the time. Thank you very much. Please can. Yeah.
My name is Sarah Parker and I represent the residents who signed a petition against the application and who fought to have the pub declared an asset of community value. That designation will mean nothing today if you approve this application. The pub was thriving until these proposals were brought forward, but the Horseshoes was more than just a pub. For over 150 years, it was a building where young and old could congregate to enjoy each other's company. Some residents may believe that a community purchase agreement for the pub is still a viable proposition, or that someone else may opt to take it on commercially. The ACV status of the site will technically provide the opportunity for this to happen. In reality, however, no one will be able to afford to purchase the site for such as us use, because the co-op proposals will set too high a value for the site. This could be avoided if the development were amended to allow the pub building to be retained. We want the pub to be turned into a community hub, which would benefit everyone in the village. Any profits made being redistributed to help the local causes. No major public benefits such as this will arise from the current application. Granted, we could gain some benefits from a larger supermarket, but this would not overweigh the harm to the
15
local
seconds.
community. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please, no, please stay seated.
Yep.
And you can turn the microphone off. It means you won't be on camera. But yeah, would you like the other speaker to speak and then both of you be available for questions, or would you like to take questions on your own?
I would prefer John to speak, and then we're both available for the questions after. Thank you.
Yeah, if Mr. Coleman. So please keep seated. If you could bring another chair with you, Mr. Coleman. Thank you very much. So the same instructions. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Tom will give you a warning. There's a couple of seconds extra on top of from the previous one. But if you'd like to close very, very quickly once we give you the warning, that would be very grateful. Thank you very much.
My name is John Coleman, and I've lived in the village for the last 33 years. This proposal is wrong on so many other levels, as well as the harm in terms of the loss of the public house. It will harm the conservation area by demolishing a heritage asset, and it will harm the vitality of the village centre. As well as taking away a much needed community facility, the co-op is also then rubbing salt in the wound by preserving just the facade of the pub. Contrary to what the planning officer says in her report, they are not retaining the pub building, they're demolishing it. So it will still look like a pub, but it isn't. This is not good for conservation, in my view. The co-op are obviously not clear on what will happen to the existing supermarket building. They suggest a cafe use, which isn't needed, as there is a successful cafe already in existence just 2 doors away from this building. So this large building is likely to remain vacant, which will be not good for the vibrancy of the village centre. It didn't have to be like this. The site is large enough for the new shop to have utilised the old supermarket floor space and then be expanded onto the pub site in such a way as to retain the whole of the main pub building for future community use, as I showed on a plan which I submitted with my objection to the application. I
15
urge the
seconds.
committee to refuse this application so that the co-op have to consult properly with local people on what is really needed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for keeping time. So do we have any questions? Councillor Higgins is the first one.
So just in your opinion, I'll probably ask the same question to the applicant as well, so has the applicant in this being the co-op, have they consulted at all? So sorry. It's just so I can see them all because of microphones there, just so you know. Has the applicant tried to engage at all with the community to try and find a way through that could be found? And I did note also where while you acknowledge there were potential benefits of a change, but in your view and the community view, you're sort of saying that you've got value to the existing use, but you're not valuing the proposed use. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so going back to your first question, I originally contacted the co-op. I got a generic email basically, which was what they probably sent to everybody, which that it would be a large store and it would be what the community wanted, blah, blah. I subsequently sent another email after that and received no response, and there's been no communication from the co-op in regards to asking for what we would like as a community, which has been really strongly supported in the ACB. So.
Just ever so quick question, because the co-op's a mutual society, always, you know, and that's what it values. So there's not been like at the village hall or anything of any engagement or consultation? No.
We had a meeting right at the beginning, very much at the beginning, about the consultation about the about the ACB, and there was no one present from the co-op there. Nobody's come forward to communicate anything with us as to what we really want in the community. There's been nothing.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you. Just following on, is relates back to the officer report where it says, you know, there's a second pub in the village and that would meet the needs of the community. Could you just explain to us how the sort of the Horseshoes is different and how it works and how it operates and how it brings the community together, and what way it does that and how it helps people in the community, maybe through socialization and stuff like that?
Yeah. So the Horseshoes is different from the Crown. They're open for longer hours. They open earlier. The Crown doesn't open till later on in the day, and it shuts a lot earlier. It very often doesn't sometimes open at bank holidays. It doesn't offer, you know, to go and watch social events, you know, social things like football or to bring people together, sporting events. It doesn't, you know, from the Horseshoes had a very much a community feel about it that was literally from, you know, from young children right the way up to you know, the real elderly, and that doesn't come across really in the Crown. And it was always really busy, really. I mean, I only moved up 6 years ago, but from where I was coming into the village, I could really see it as like a community hub, and it was really important to the community. And I've got that from just living here from 6 years. So the people that have lived here for absolutely years, I can't imagine how they must feel that now this has been taken away from them. There's a guy, he's a blind guy, he's been going for over 50 years. He's used to that pub. He went 2-3 times a week. He could navigate his way around. He was really social. He liked to, you know, he really liked to, he knew everyone in there. He trusted people. Like literally he would go, can you just get my pint for me? And I'll give him. Now he's having to go elsewhere and try and trust other people that he's not known for years. He won't go to the Crown. And it's people like that. It's the elderly, the people now that I don't see in the Crown, that were there before, and they're elderly. They must be just sat at home doing nothing now. And for me, that breaks my heart. So that was my real thing of putting the ACV in the first place.
Thank you. Any other Councillor Higgins?
Yeah, it was just because of what you were saying, and I'm going to ask a really obvious question, and sometimes the most stupid questions promote the best answers.
Yeah.
But what you've just demonstrated, then what you've explained of how the community uses it, please can you advise the committee how that can't happen if this was a shop?
Yeah, if it was a shop, we wouldn't be able to, you know, you can't meet in an aisle on frozen aisle and have a discussion, you know, those, you know, we've had 2 years of being stuck indoors with COVID, and, you know, we supported the pub through all of that, you know. As soon as we got out into COVID, we're all there sat outside on our chairs, and, you know, it just has that community feel about being able to socialize and bring everyone together and stop that loneliness, and, you know, we had family events. There were lots of different events there that brought the community together. Taking it away, you know, on a bank holiday, we'd have a singer and a barbecue, and all the kids would be there, and there'd be elderly people. That doesn't happen now, and I can't see in the co-op how you can do that in kind of aisle frozen, having a chat. Or do you know what I mean? That, you know, they propose a cafe. We've got a perfectly new one that's just been opened, doing really, really well. She's completely worried about the co-op open a cafe and her losing everything she's put into it because she feels she won't be able to compete with that. So, you know, we've already got a cafe, we don't need another one. We have got another pub, but unfortunately she's freehold and she makes her own rules and she decides that it suits her to open at certain hours. And, you know, that wasn't what the Horseshoes was about. It was always open really early, you know, to accommodate everybody that wanted to go in.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchett first and then Councillor Gancy.
Thank you very much, both of your presentations and enthusiasm. Are there not some realistic issues here that if it was a viable going concern, the brewery wouldn't have sold it? And are there not some issues with the age of the building that, in terms of investment and food being necessity, that it was a particular problem place to make profits with? I mean, that was, you know, so I mean, if it was a real good goer, they wouldn't necessarily have sold it, would they?
Well, there's no evidence
No.
to that effect.
From my point of view, we put in the ACV after, because the co-op and the brewery actually covered it up and said they were not selling it. So we didn't know nothing. It was a thriving pub, but we just never thought it would shut. Like literally, it'd been there 150 years, and we thought, no, it's never going to shut. It's doing really well. It's like thriving. And then all of a sudden, they kept it quiet, it got sold, and then that's why the ACV got input afterwards, because we just never ever thought that it would be closed, because it's just such a vibrant, it was busy every weekend. The reason is because of the tenancy agreements. You have to pay lots in rent. If it was a community value, like has been at Frisbee, you own the building, so the community owns it. We don't have those overheads to start off with. We can shop different places to get beer. We can do more in respect of what we're allowed to do with it. So we do think it's viable. The community do think there's a viability of it being a thriving pub, and I think it's really disappointing that it's not being given.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Gancy.
Yes, probably just going on from what you just said. So really, what are you saying, that the Horseshoes was a good, viable pub and served the community in a way different to the other pub in the area? It's totally different, providing a different different group of people. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? In that case, thank you very much for your time. And I'd like to call forward Matthew Rowe, the agent, speaking for the application. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Same instructions that the small face on the microphone. You have 3 minutes and Tom will give you a warning at 30 seconds. And if at that time you'd like to start closing your presentation. And thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The cooperative has had a long-standing presence within Asfordby Village Centre. The village is an important location for the cooperative and has long been recognised as a location which would benefit from an improved convenience retail offering, given its role within the borough as a local service centre, the most sustainable location for growth outside of Melton Mowbray Town Centre. The sole intention of the application is to deliver a significantly improved convenience store via £2 million worth of investment for the residents of Asfordby, which would result in a significant improvement in the product lines available to local residents for purchase, contributing positively towards Asfordby's overall vitality by encouraging pedestrian footfall and link trips to other nearby community facilities. The existing store suffers from a limited sales area, which is well below the modern day requirements, indeed expectations, of cooperative stores and customers in villages similar in size to Asfordby. And it has a cramped and aged internal layout which greatly restricts the range of products that are available for purchase by residents. Given the proximity of the store to neighbouring buildings to the north and to the west, there is no scope to extend the existing store structurally, and henceforth an alternative site has long been sought. The proposed store will offer a significantly enhanced range of convenience goods to local residents via an increased sales floor area, and it should also be noted that present-day cooperative stores also often include other beneficial facilities for local residents, including parcel postage and collection facilities, hot food counters, lottery stands, community activity, notice boards, etc. Cycle parking is also proposed to promote sustainable trips to and from the site and indeed Asfordby Village Centre. The council's own retail study from 2016 demonstrated that a significant amount of convenience net spend within the zone which Asfordby resides is lost to other surrounding areas, including areas outside of Melton Borough, such as Thurmaston. The proposals will assist in capturing this leaked expenditure, reducing the needs for residents to travel to alternative locations, in some cases outside of the borough. The proposals will also secure the long-term use of the site as an alternative community facility. The public house ceased trading on the 1st of March 2023 and has stood vacant since this date. Policy C7 Criterion A requires that where one community facility, in this case the public house, is lost, there should be an alternative provision within the village, which members and indeed members of the public have noted. The sole remaining public house, the Crown, is also located less than 100 metres from the application site. There will be no increase in the number of convenience stores within Asfordby, and there will be no net loss in the number of community facilities available for residents within the village. I trust this speech is of assistance and look forward to answering any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowe. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, hello, Mr. Rowe. Could you tell us, have you actually purchased the site, or is it subject to planning approval?
The site is under a commercial contract that was exchanged on the 1st of March 2022, and that contract is in place subject to planning being granted. The status of that contract does not change, to my understanding, as part of the ACV process, etc.
So, no, so one more. Yeah. So the two speakers previous just commented that they didn't believe, or that nobody's aware of any consultation that's taken place in the village. Sorry. Could you explain if you've undertaken any consultation, if so, what that was, but if you haven't undertaken consultation, why that hasn't happened? Because my understanding of the cooperative is that you're meant to be a community valued based society.
That's correct. With regards to engagement with, the council, a pre-application for this site was submitted in June 2022. That was for a completely alternative proposal, which was deemed to be not appropriate by various consultees, including the conservation officer, and the cooperative worked proactively regarding the design, indeed the fundamental operation of that store with that consultee. Regarding members of the public, unfortunately he's not here, but we have had discussions with Councillor Ronnie de Burgh, who I understand sits on the parish council. I'm not going to commit to anything that he said, that would not be appropriate in this circumstance, but we did understand the view of the community at the time, and where possible through the planning process, we have responded to those queries, concerns as best we can.
So could I just come in? Sorry, I'm sure some other people want to come in. So basically that's a no to the consultation, because the chair of one person on a parish council I wouldn't see as being representative of the whole community. Would you agree with that, or would you not agree with that?
I don't want to be putting words in anybody's mouths. It does show a level of engagement with the local community. I maintain that view. I think it's also worth noting as well that, notwithstanding, there are other factors that have to be taken into consideration, commercial factors as well, which explain why a planning application had to be submitted at the time. Indeed, the very intention of the application, as I've reiterated, is for it to be a community facility, and I hope that is captured within the proposals put forth.
Councillor Higgins, and then Alnut, and then Gordon.
To be fair, I think it was all about the consultation. So I think, just in clarification, it's consultation with one person. So that's answered my question.
Councillor Alnut.
Yes, interesting. Reference the existing building, which you've suggested could be a cafe. Would the co-op, if this application goes ahead and the supermarket element is in the old pub, would the co-op be disposed to making the vacant site available to the community for it to choose what it would like to do with it, rather than a cafe of a commercial nature? Would the co-op do that? It's a simple question, really.
Again, not want to be putting words in anybody's mouths, etc. Given the, we did review public comments when they came in. Ms. Smith very handily provided them to us as part of the process. the justification behind the cafe was it was understood that would be a wanted community facility, but as rightly noted, in the interim period of preparing the application and submitting it, effectively that community cafe alternatively came forward. Now, within the scope of this application, there is, of course, the proposal is changing use to a cafe. That doesn't prohibit any future planning application coming forward upon the grant of permission that would potentially propose an alternative use. But I do refer back to what the officer said originally, which is that under the new use classes order, the existing convenience unit is now captured under something called Class E. And I've not been made aware that there are any restrictions with regards to any previous planning permission in that store that would restrict the ability for the existing convenience store to undergo effectively a change of use to another use within Class E, and that would not require planning permission. So that event could come forward in any event without the need to do that.
Sorry, can I just
supplementary?
Yeah. I understand the planning process for change of usage. I'm asking about a policy here, a co-op policy. Would they be disposed to make that premises available for general community use of another sort? Of course, they would have to submit the planning application. That would be a different process. I'm talking about use of the of that empty shop for uses other than a commercial enterprise of any sort. So, for example, would they be at the co-op be disposed to making it available as a cyber cafe for young people, or a place to meet, to try and get some disengaged children into doing something else? I'm talking about a genuine community use. The planning process would be a separate issue. It's a simple question, really. Do you think the co-op would entertain that? Because it might help the community swallow what the planning process is going to force down their throat.
Thank you. Again, there is the potential for that, but with the greatest respect, I'm not going to put words in my client's mouth.
Councillor Gordon, and thank you for waiting.
Right. Yes, it's similar to the last question, which I thought was really good to do with the young people. But I was also wondering if you would upgrade the cafe, perhaps alcohol sold in the evening so that people could come in, because I know that the co-op's going to be open late anyway. So I'm wondering if that could be a possibility, so that they could have, because of loss, if it goes through, they will have lost that pub. So I thought at least you could be given something back in that respect.
Just a reminder, though, that licensing can't be part of planning. Yeah.
Sorry, Claire, if I can just intervene, I think the issue you would have is I don't know how you control that. So you couldn't put a condition, for example, that alcohol would be sold between a set time in terms of the planning. So I think you would struggle to be able to do that. I appreciate where you're going with that and the thought process. I don't think the planners know any other way, but I can't think how you'd be able to actually control that to make that happen.
Thank you. Any further questions for the speaker? Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, Tom. I'm afraid no, you didn't actually make the application to speak, so I'm afraid not. Tom would like to come back on the question.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Higgins, sorry, you asked about was the co-op registered. We've looked at the ACV register. I can't see that the co-op is currently registered as an asset to the community value.
I think it's the post office. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Thank you, whoever did that. I think there's like two type of shops in Asford. So if any of them had.
So a quick word search for Asfordby on the register shows the Asfordby Acres. I don't know what that is. And Frisbee Lakes. They're the only two that are showing.
So briefly, I think the answer is no. So the community hasn't registered a shop as an asset of community value. Thank you.
Okay, then in that case, I'd like to open this for debate. Would any Would you like to open the debate? Councillor Brown and then Councillor Gordon.
Okay. All right. I think, yeah, we've got a very difficult application in front of us, and we've got an issue with timing really around this. And I've been involved in two pubs, etc. Two different reasons, but we've got a little bit of an issue with the ACV coming after the actual purchase of the pub and it being shut, etc. If that had come before, it would make this much easier, I suppose, to work through. But saying that, we have an asset that is very valued and has been very valued by the community of Asserby. It certainly has had a client group that's gone into it that's been very supportive of each other. And as we've heard from the couple here that were speaking, that has been detrimental since the close of it has led to a detrimental loss to the socialization that those people have been able to probably do on a day-by-day basis. We've also got, there is NPPF policies, you know, that you can look at around 92 and 93 that around social value and community and assets, etc. And there is examples across the country of where there is places for two pubs and you know, that shouldn't be something out of this. But looking at that, to me, it's about the community. And if we look at the NPPF, it's about, we need to guard against the unnecessary loss of valued facilities and services as laid out at point 93 in the NPPF, and that's what's coming to me. And also there'll be the issue of C7, but I'm going to leave that. That's probably something that Councillor Higgins will want to come in more about, because he's certainly during the week put it across a lot better than I could do. But what we have to debate here is that this planning application could be detrimental to this community, and that's what we need to weigh up. And at the moment, I'm weighing towards detriment rather than towards positivity. And the other reason for that is that we have a cafe that's opened up that's been quite successful, and that cafe, quite rightly, will be threatened and probably afraid of the loss of a business, etc. And I think finally, for me, the really disappointing way in this is that the community haven't been consulted. You know, we've got a national body here, a cooperative body that is on TV, is on saying what they're doing for farmers, communities, children, schools, and we haven't had a consultation with one person in the parish council. And to me, that's a little bit of a sad reflection on that. And how can we robustly consider something here tonight when we haven't had a robust consideration of the impact of this on the community? That's in my view.
Just before I come to Councillor Gordon, Sarah would just like to come in on the competition.
Thank you. I just wanted to just draw your attention to the fact of competition between an existing cafe and a proposed cafe is not something that we can consider through the planning system, as regrettable as it is, but it isn't something that we can consider.
No, I said in my view, not in a policy reason.
Thank you. Well worded. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, I'd like to say as well that it's an awful shame for the horseshoes to be closed, and you know, because there was a different ambience from what I can remember going back many years ago. There was a different ambience to that pub as regarding to the Crown, and it's an awful shame that that choice, you know, will be gone if it goes through. But also during the conversations, it said about the profits down, and that's probably a reason, obviously, for the brewery to sell it. But I think we have to consider that there's been 2 years of COVID, and with the people coming through that, especially the older people, they had to have time to get confidence to come out and meet up in groups again. So that takes time. And I mean, it's an awful shame that there wasn't more time to see if that pub could be viable because of that. And I just thought I'd just like to mention that. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Higgins.
Planning members and officers all know what I'm going to say, but because a lot of it was in the briefing, but obviously for the public debate, I think it's really important. So in the report, I had a concern that policy C7 hasn't been interpreted the way when the local plan went through and was presented of how members at the time who adopted that plan believed it would be interpreted. And the reason I say that, and as I presented and asked the question earlier, is government was very, very clear, and in 2017, that permitted development rights were removed from conversion of pubs to shops, and they did that and gave it the power back to local communities, is what they said. And there's a reason why government did that, and the document that the Minister of State sent forward explained all that in the impact assessment. So there's a thrust and a direction from Parliament. Then, as I said earlier, an appeal that happened in my ward and at Thorpe Satchel, an appeal inspector. Now, I'm not going on about how that appeal was, because there is differences, because that was the only pub in the village and this isn't. So, as the officers said, but the appeal inspector did say this. And this is why I don't believe, and I'll go on to the examples I give the officers and members for the public, why I've done that. And again, the community group couldn't buy that pub, but as the inspector said, there is a village hall in Thorpe Satchel and it has occasionally been used as a bar. However, the character and use of a village hall are very different to those of a pub. In my view, the hall could not reasonably be considered to satisfy the same community needs as a pub. And that's where I was giving the thrust, I believe, in the direction of how C7 works, because a shop isn't a pub, pub's not a shop, village hall and all the other stuff. The other reason what I said is I think if we interpret C7 the way this is, and if we give permission on C7, now I will caveat that is the other policies that the officers put for reasons of converting it, there are very good reasons, but that's why I don't think C7 is because if we close pubs and make and I gave a very extreme example, we've seen where the Crooked House pub was knocked down. If I then say I will have allotments, and then I put allotments out at £1,000 a pop, and then no one hires the allotment from me, it's not viable. And then I could change the use again. So that's an extreme example. I don't think we're trying to create that loophole. And that's why I think the thrust of C7 is different. But as other people have said, what I'm very disappointed about, and while there are good reasons to support the proposal, I'm trying to come to reasons why part of it, I think, is not to go with the recommendation. And I think the lack of consultation and no viability, I think that's really disappointing. If I'm going to vote to close this pub in perpetuity for the community, I need to be really satisfied that's what the community wants, or it's not viable. And I haven't got that part. And so that's where I am at the moment. But I have very much, bearing in mind of the debates you guys had on the solar farm, I've very much considered why I'm coming to this conclusion. It's not just off the top of my head.
I would just like to bring Sarah in on one particular point.
Thank you, Chair. As we've exchanged various emails over the last few days with regards to this, we respectfully disagree with that view, essentially, of how the policy is interpreted. The what ifs and the creating of the loophole, we don't consider that the policy does that, essentially. And obviously through planning, we can't consider if we do this, then this could happen and this could happen, because each application has to be considered on its individual merits. There was one other thing I was just going to say, and it's just literally disappeared out of my mind as I've been talking. I should have written it down, but I'll come back to it.
I'll allow you to come back later. Councillor Pritchett.
Was the pre-application advice requested and given? And if so, in what format? And was the written output, and was this particular issue of consultation adequately dealt with then?
My understanding, and Sarah, please feel free to disagree, a pre-app process is confidential. We are not at liberty to divulge that information, but if the applicant did want to, that is fine. So unfortunately, I can't offer that information right now.
But there should be secure processes of who's giving it, the quality, how many people are involved. We've already had one where the pre-application advice was a temporary planning officer walking around a field, nothing in documents, nothing documented. So I'm just wondering if we can if we're rolling this all the way back to the pre-application stage. That was all.
Sarah, you ready to come back?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just to pick on your comments, pick up on your comment there, Councillor Pritchett, the pre-application advice is confidential. Sometimes pre-application advice is verbal, sometimes it's written. It depends on the type of submission that's been made to us, the amount of documentation that's been submitted, and the type of information that the applicant requires. And it is not binding on any decisions of the council. It is literally officers' advice. The second part, in response to Councillor Higgins, which I have remembered what I was going to say, I would just caution against making any kind of motion to refuse in the case of viability. And I draw you coming back to that policy C7 of the wording or. So we need to be quite careful that it's part 1 or part 2, and we are satisfied that it meets part 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely there that it is 1 or 2, but then it goes to the other parts of A and B. And as we say, the potential impact closure may have on the village hall and its community with regard to public use and support for both the existing and proposed use. That's absolutely there. I still think, and bearing in mind, I think as Councillor Ornett said, and probably for wider debate, if someone's going to come up with these type of applications, it's really, if it wasn't viable, that would be supporting, that would be really supporting it. But as it's not there, we can't add any weight because they're not saying it's not viable. And that's what I would have expected from the applicant, that the applicant say it's not viable, not to say prove it's viable, to prove it's not viable. And we don't have that. And so that's where I'm going. And thank you for the advice, because that is where I am in my mind. It's about that they must demonstrate that consideration has been given to, and I don't believe that has happened. So that's where I'm going to the B part of that policy.
Tom, you just like to come back on something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Some of those points were actually picked up there, so I was just going to give you the same caution about the viability. Of course, it's not actually been suggested, I don't think, anyway, that the pub is unviable. I've not seen that anywhere. But in any event, because that first one, sorry, the first point being valid, we would say that it is probably not the best way to go down. I think one of the other things I wanted to pick up on was the what if situations. And I think what your suggestion was if they convert it to another community use and they say that's not viable, what could they then turn it into, say, residential, for example? But part A of the second part of the policy would require, because the planning commission would come back, they would have to look at the other alternative community uses. So that might give you some reassurance there. I'll just come back on the other points. And I think ultimately from what members are saying, it's in terms of C7, it all comes down to the part B of the second part. And that is that the proposal must demonstrate that consideration has been given to the potential impact closure may have on the village and its community with regard to the public use and support for both the existing and the proposed use. So I think if we're looking at C7 in the debate, we're looking at really what are the pros of this and what are the cons. And the pros are, from what it sounds, gaining a newer village shop and the community cafe, against the cons of losing this particular pub. The last thing I would just say as well, I think we just need to be slightly careful when we're talking about the character of pubs. So we know there's lots of different pubs out there that serve different needs, but ultimately a pub is a pub in terms of the use class order, and therefore somebody could change one pub to another without the need for planning permission. So I think we just need to be a little bit cautious there, but ultimately my legal view is that it all comes down to B of weighing up the pros of what's being offered against the cons of what's being lost.
Is it the same question or? Okay.
And just to be really clear on why I was saying pubs, village halls and shops, and that's why I referenced the planning inspector and that government legislation, is it seems to me the thrust from Parliament and the appeal inspector is a pub is not an allotment, even though it's community use, it's just not that. And that's where the thrust is.
Yeah, we made that point. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just the first thing is just a bit of clarity for us all, having gone through this process, is that if it's valued as a shop, it'll be valued at one thing in a red book valuation. If it's valued as a pub, it'll be valued in a different valuation. If it's valued as a community centre, it'll be valued on a different valuation. And then it'll also be valued depending on the whether it's open, closed, or the viability, how it's operating, etc. So I think that's important. That test hasn't been done as far as I've seen. But the point that I want to make is that also in NPPF 93, it says provide social, recreational, cultural facilities and services. The community needs planning policies decisions should. I'll not go through A, B, C, etc. But C is guard against the unnecessary loss of value to facilities and services, particularly where this would reduce the community's ability to meet its day-to-day needs. And we're hearing some of that, and I'm putting some weight to that. Ensure that, sorry, bear with me 1 second. Take into the account, and then take into account and support the delivery of local strategies to improve health, social and cultural. And I think the key thing is cultural for all sections of the community. And we're hearing that tonight as well. And what I'm saying is that we need to be given some weight to this and not just saying just because something's over there, we can just close something over here and then that's gone. So I just wanted to make that my point to the committee. So.
Councillor Freer.
Thanks, Chair. Just listening to the debate and looking at some sources online, I know we've talked about one of the things that I'm quite confused about is why we keep calling it a community cafe. Because at the end of the day, a cafe is a cafe. We don't call every cafe in Mowbray a community cafe. We call them off the beaten track cafe, or so. It's kind of leading us down a false path by calling it community cafe. We need to say as it is, it's going to be a cafe. The other thing is, I know we've talked about viability, but for me, having a robust consultation and a case to prove the need for this different use, to me doesn't seem to be there. I would say that there would be a lack of need for a development or a change of use. That's in my opinion. I'm not trying to go against planning policy. I would say also having a negative effect on the character of the environment also seems to be add weight. I've read some things about, and this is what I believe is as a council should be doing, encouraging provision and retention of village services and facilities within villages consistent with the scale and function of existing centres. So that falls part of somebody else's, I realise that somebody else's local plan or planning policy, but I truly believe that we should be looking to protect that rather than the other way in approving this application to get rid of a community facility. I'll obviously, if anyone's going to propose, a rejection of a plan, we need to be putting forward proper planning considerations, and I'll carry on searching to see if I can find specifics for that. But that would be where I'm looking at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. You'd like to come back to a point?
Thank you. Just wanted to draw members' attention to the rest of the paragraph 93 of the NPPF, which Councillor Brown directed you to part C, which was the guarding against the unnecessary loss of valued facilities. That paragraph ideally should be read as a whole, and there are a number of sections to that, from part A right down to part E. Part D is ensuring that established shops, facilities and services are able to develop and modernise and are retained for the benefit of the community.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, again, it comes back to what was said earlier, it's about how you interpret this, and that's just one bit of it. If I take back up to A, it says plan positively for the provision and use of shows spaces, community facilities such as local shops, meeting places, sports venues, open space, cultural buildings, public houses. So we can agree to disagree, but my interpretation is that could be used to protect a public house if need be, and that's the point I was making. So sorry, members, I didn't mean to just take you to that point. I just meant to use that for the quickness of the debate. Sorry.
Tom, would you like to come in?
Yeah, there's just a couple of quick points that I've really picked up on. So 93C, going back to Councillor Brown, what you were saying, talks about the community's ability to meet its day-to-day needs. And then when we were talking before about C7, we were talking about those pros and cons, and the public use and support for the existing and the proposed use. Obviously, you've heard from two speakers today who've given you some information from their perspectives, but I almost wonder whether there's perhaps more information that members might need about how those pubs differ and what the uses are. So that is another option for members as well, if they feel that actually that's quite a hard decision to make because they don't have the full story perhaps on that use and the public supports.
Thank you, Tom. And Councillor, thank you very much for waiting.
Well, I'll pick up on the last point. Is the law officer suggesting a site visit to two pubs? Because if he is, I'm up for that. Look, Chairman, what we've got is a situation where we've got a gut feeling that we don't like the application because of the lack of consultation on the one hand, and a gut feeling that something's being drawn out of the life of the community of the village. But we're struggling to find, and I had a struggle to hear some of the comments, but what we're struggling to find is our legitimate planning reasons. MPP was and C7, which give good grounds for refusing, and that's what we're struggling with yet again. And what I don't quite understand in the dialogue between the officers and Councillor Brown is whether we're weighing different letters of the alphabet within MPP, one against the other, or whether we are saying they have to be taken as a composite whole. Are they mutually inclusive or mutually exclusive? That's what because I would dearly love. My drift is towards refusal, but as I said earlier, I think we're being strangled by a rather loose local plan in the first place. The lack of consultation, except with one former councillor who's no longer with us in a temporal sense of being here. That's what we're struggling with, aren't we, really? Past sins have long shadows.
Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there, that policy should be read as a whole. So you don't necessarily just pick the individual ones, but we're led to pick individual ones as to which ones actually focus our minds to the proposal that is before us, essentially. Officers have reviewed all of those policies. Amy has set out within her report how officers, essentially in their professional opinion, view the proposal. Members, you are more than welcome to consider within your debate if you do not agree with that. And obviously you need to be picking out those policies essentially to inform us as to how you can defend that should you motion a refusal. There's no specific requirement for a consultation, but there is within it a saying about a consideration, a demonstration of a consideration has been given to the potential impact that the closure may have on the village. So it's not an absolute requirement within the policy for a consultation. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
Just so everyone knows where I am, I won't be voting for the recommendation, certainly with C7, because I fundamentally disagree with how it's been interpreted. And I don't think that was the intention of it. And I know we might be doing the local plan review and all the other stuff. And if we are, then maybe C7 should be in that whole thing, because that all said, and hearing around there, in the balance review of this, there's some really good points, not just what Co-op have put forward and how they've explained it. I can absolutely see their view of a better offer of shopping facilities in and around Asfordby, and I could see how that could benefit the community of that part. So I've got that way up, and there are policies that support that. That all said, as I said before, I think if anybody puts an application on this, and if anyone's watching this debate, you can't just literally come in because you really do impact those communities. And as a decision maker, whether that's an officer or committee, we have one go at this, and we've got to get this absolutely right. And while I'm comfortable in I don't believe it complies with C7 or the National Planning Policy Framework, or as the way the government has directed at Parliament level. So I do think there's national and local policies that are weighing against how it is. Equally, if the community and the CUP want to talk about it and get it, but that doesn't equal mean that it's a one-way shop, basically, that you go through your whole view. Because equally, if the community, and I do believe the community is saying quite loudly, they're not having support for its proposed use, and that's where I'm really struggling. And but equally, I don't want to lose the opportunity that, as the applicant's agent has said, it's some investment. So it's not an easy throwaway decision, but at the moment, I'm leaning more to the refusal for those reasons on that. But at some point, we're going to have to come to a motion.
I was going to say, is that a proposal, or would anybody like to come forward with a proposal? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'll propose that we refuse this application based on policy C7. I'll need a bit of help with this, because I don't know whether you'd be able to help me, Councillor Higgins, on this, because you know C7 better than I do. Yeah. So basically, on the rural services, and it's on B, the potential impact closure may have on the village and its community with regard to the public use and support for both the existing and proposed use. Okay, then I would like to add in NPPF 92A, NPPF A, B, and C.
Any other proposed amendments to that proposal?
Again, probably with officers' advice on this, and if the proposer does it. Paragraph 84 of the NPPF provides explicit support for pubs, as I believe, and that they're important for tourism and necessary as village facilities. When supporting a prosperous rural community section, planning policies and decisions should enable the retention and development of accessible local services and community facilities, such as local shops, meeting places, sports venues, open space, cultural buildings, public houses, and places of worship. That's paragraph 84. But as it states right at the start at C7, support will be given to the proposals and activities that protect, retain, or enhance existing community services or facilities. And I don't believe that's interchangeable on that particular part. But anyway.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I would accept that. Don't know whether you're going to second my proposal.
Yeah, and I'll second that. Thank you.
Councillor Gansey.
Yes, thank you. This is a very difficult situation, and I totally agree with the proposal at the moment. I worked on the local plan since I became a councillor sort of 8 years ago, and the intention was to protect public houses and shops. I don't believe the intention was to exchange a public house for a shop. That's why I can't really agree with the interpretation that we've had this evening for C7. So it is something that we do need to look at going forward, because we need to define it slightly more if it's been interpreted a different way from the intended sort of policy. So I totally understand that and how we've arrived at this situation. But I do think it's very relevant, paragraph B in C7. And also the NPPF mentioned 84, 92A, 93A, B and C.
Any further comments on the proposal? Councillor Pritchett.
Just for clarity, could the applicant go away through a consultation process and do various work and then this come back again?
That's would be a different proposal. So, sorry, Tom, do you want to go?
So I think there's a question of whether that's a possibility rather than putting it out there. And I think, Councillor Pritchett, what you're asking is, if the matter was deferred, would that happen, or could that happen, and could the consultation be undertaken? And I assume you make particular reference when you say that to part 2 of C7, that part paragraph B, to understand the public support. Is that, have I understood that correctly?
You give me more credit than I deserve. No, I'm just interested in if it was refused, could they come back and then go through that process and then come back again to satisfy the committee?
Yeah, of course, yeah, an applicant could come back with a slightly different proposal if they wish to. As I alluded to previously, my advice was there is also the option of deferral if you feel that you are missing that information. To do that, of course, you come with the smaller risk of non-determination, but perhaps that gives you a fuller picture of understanding the public supports for both the pros and the cons. As I mentioned, you've heard from some speakers who are obviously, clear on their views, but if members feel that they already have that full picture and the opinions, then that's fair enough, but it's whether that gives you an option to gather more. That would be my advice, to at least consider that.
Councillor Higgins.
Just a point of clarification. The only reason I'm going to this and happy with the refusal, and that's why I asked the question. So the community has put an ACV on a pub, and they haven't put an ACV on a shop. So there is support, and it's part of that. But equally, then there's the petition demonstrating its support for the current use, and obviously, I haven't seen anything to ask me to say they want something for the proposed use. So there's no other counter petition, so to speak. So that's why I've come to that conclusion.
Fine. Any other comments on the proposal? In that case, sorry, Sarah, would you like to get? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So on the basis of Councillor Brown's proposal, I've come up with some wording essentially to sort of string those together. So I'll read that out now, and you're more than welcome to make any comments on it. So in the opinion of the local planning authority, the loss of the public house would not be adequately mitigated by the new retail store and proposed new cafe. The proposals do not protect, retain or enhance existing community services and facilities. The closure of the public house and its replacement with a retail store is not supported by the local community, and the proposal is therefore contrary to policy C7B of the adopted Melton Local Plan and paragraphs 84 and 92A, 93A, B and C of the NPPF. Thank you, Chair.
Is that an agreement? In that case, then, I'd like to put this proposal forward for the vote. So all those in favour of the proposal, please vote. Yeah. Right, those for, sorry, against, yeah, against. And abstentions. Therefore, the proposal is carried. The application is refused. Thank you, everybody, for this evening, and thank you for your time and patience.